I still remember the exact sound the world made when it broke. It wasn't loud, like glass shattering. It was quieter, like the air being sucked out of a room. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, staring at the words that burned themselves into my brain, words I knew I'd never be able to unsee. My fiancé and my sister. The two people who were supposed to love me the most. I couldn't breathe. My fingers went numb. For a moment, I honestly thought maybe I'd gone insane, that my brain was twisting normal messages into something awful because I was exhausted or hormonal or paranoid. But then I scrolled up, and there it was, the proof. The way he talked to her, the jokes, the intimacy, the way they mocked me. It was all there, plain as day. I don't think anyone ever really prepares for betrayal like that. You always think you'd know, right? That you'd see it coming, that you'd feel it. But I didn't. I had no idea. I was 3 months pregnant, tired all the time, trying to keep our home running, raising my daughter from my previous relationship, and planning a wedding that now felt like a cruel joke. And while I was picking colors and menus and saving for the dress, the man I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with was sneaking around with my own sister. My sister! I remember staring at my reflection in the dark phone screen and whispering to myself, "You've got to be kidding me." I kept scrolling, reading line after line, my heart pounding like it was trying to tear out of my chest. They made fun of me. That's what gutted me most. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional cruelty. They said I was too distracted, that I never noticed anything, that I deserved a little lesson. A lesson? From them! What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have called them right away? Would you have packed your bags? I wanted to. I wanted to scream and throw everything he owned into the street. But I didn't. I sat there in silence for hours, just staring at those messages, reading them over and over until the words blurred together, because part of me couldn't believe it was real. When he came home that night, he acted normal, kissed me on the forehead, asked if I wanted takeout, and I played along. I nodded, smiled, said sure. I felt like a ghost watching someone else's life. He had no idea that while he was washing his hands in the kitchen, I was looking at the same hands that had touched my sister, the same hands that had texted her things he'd never said to me. The next morning, I dropped my daughter off at school and drove around aimlessly. I must have gone through every emotion humanly possible in those few hours. Rage, sorrow, disbelief, humiliation, and then back to rage again. I thought about confronting my sister, but the idea of seeing her face made me physically sick. She'd always been the charming one, the one people liked instantly. She'd get away with murder if she smiled just right. And me? I was the responsible one, the steady one, the one everyone came to when they needed help. I'd always defended her too. Even when she messed up, I was the one smoothing things over with our parents. But not this time. There's no smoothing over betrayal like that. By the time I got home, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to yell or beg or cry. I was going to expose them, both of them, in one go. No hiding behind lies or excuses. I wanted everyone, their families, my parents, everyone who'd ever thought we were the perfect couple, to see exactly what kind of people they were. But before that, I needed to plan. I called my mom that night. She could tell right away something was wrong. My voice cracked the moment I said her name. "Mom, I need to tell you something." She got quiet. "What's going on, honey?" I could hear the background noise of my parents' house, the TV, my dad coughing, the faint clinking of dishes. Familiar sounds that suddenly made me feel like a child again. I said, "I'm breaking up with him." There was a pause. "What? Why? What happened?" "I'll tell you, but not over the phone. Just, please, be ready when I come to the family gathering this weekend. Things are going to get messy." She started asking questions, but I told her I'd explain everything in person. I hung up before I could second-guess myself. That weekend, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their messages. Her laughing emoji, his smug replies, the way they talked about my pregnancy, like it was an inconvenience, like I was a burden. When I pulled into my parents' driveway that Sunday, I sat in the car for almost 5 minutes before getting out. Everyone was already there. I could see their cars lined up, my sister's blue SUV, his silver sedan. My stomach turned just looking at them parked side by side. When I walked in, the smell of roasted chicken hit me. My mom was in the kitchen, pretending everything was normal, but the second she saw my face, she knew. She tried to pull me aside, whispering, "Sweetheart, maybe we should talk first, just you and me." I shook my head. "No. Everyone needs to hear this." She looked worried, but didn't stop me. I walked straight into the living room. Everyone was sitting around chatting, my dad in his recliner, my sister on the couch, legs crossed like she owned the place, and my fiancé, my ex-fiancé, though no one knew that yet, beside her, laughing at something she had said. When they saw me, their laughter died, instantly. My sister rolled her eyes, muttering, "Here we go." He mumbled something under his breath, probably hoping I'd keep quiet. I took a deep breath. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "I need everyone to listen," I said. They all looked confused. My mom hovered in the doorway. My dad frowned. My sister gave me that fake concerned look she always used when she was caught doing something wrong. And then I started reading. The room went dead silent. I read the messages, word for word, starting with the ones that hurt the most. I didn't spare any details. The jokes, the mockery, the times they'd met when I thought he was working late, the timestamps proving he was with her while I was home with my daughter. Every line hit like a hammer. My sister's expression shifted from annoyance to panic. She said, "You're lying. You're twisting things." Her voice low and shaky. I held up my phone. "These are your words, Lisa. Do you want me to read the part where you laughed about me being too stupid to notice? Or the one where he said he wished you were the one he'd proposed to?" Her face went pale. She glanced at him, and he looked away. He tried to interrupt me. "You're overreacting," he said, trying to sound calm. "You're pregnant and emotional, and you're taking things out of context." I snapped. "Out of context? You called me a boring wife before I've had the chance to become one. You told her about my pregnancy before you even told me you were ready to be a father again. You both laughed about me being stressed? How's that out of context?" No one moved. The only sound was my mom quietly gasping in the corner. My dad just stared at the floor. My sister stood up, her voice trembling. "You're not okay. You need help." I cut her off. "No, you need help. You need help understanding what loyalty means, what family means." He stood then, muttering something like, "I'm not doing this." He tried to storm out, but I followed him to the doorway. "You don't get to walk away like a victim," I said. "You did this. You two did this." He didn't even look back. When I turned around, my sister was crying, ugly crying, the kind she used to fake as a kid to get sympathy. But this time, no one comforted her. My mom looked horrified. My dad still hadn't said a word. Finally, my sister grabbed her purse and ran out, shouting over her shoulder that I was a dramatic liar who blew everything out of proportion. The door slammed so hard the walls shook. I stood there, breathing hard, my phone still in my hand. My mom came over, put her arms around me and whispered, "I'm so sorry, honey." But even she didn't seem to know what to say. That was the day everything cracked open. After that, the messages started pouring in. He texted me nonstop, first apologizing, then accusing, then begging. One minute he was sorry, the next he was furious that I'd humiliated him. He said I'd ruined his life. Can you imagine the audacity? The man who betrayed me thinking he was the victim because I refused to keep his secret? My sister wasn't any better. She called me names I won't repeat, said I'd destroy
her reputation, as if she hadn't destroyed her own. She told me I was jealous of her, that I'd always hated her. Classic deflection. But despite the pain, despite the heartbreak and the mess, there was something else under all of it. Relief. A strange, deep, quiet relief. Because now, at least, the pretending was over. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I could still smell my parents' house on my clothes, that mixture of roast chicken and disinfectant and heartbreak. The scene kept replaying in my mind like a film stuck on loop. My sister's face when the truth hit her, my ex-fiancé's back as he walked out, my mother's eyes wide with disbelief. Every time I thought I was done crying, another wave came. Grief is strange like that. It doesn't move in a straight line. It circles back and bites when you least expect it. Around 3 a.m, I got up, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. The house was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. I stared out the window at the streetlights, wondering how the world could look exactly the same when everything in my life had changed. My phone buzzed again. Him. I almost didn't look, but curiosity won. The message said, "You didn't have to do that in front of everyone. We could have worked it out privately." I laughed out loud, a bitter sound in the quiet house. Worked it out privately. Like he'd worked it out privately with my sister? I turned the phone off and shoved it in a drawer. By morning, I felt hollow, but I had things to do. My daughter needed breakfast, needed school clothes, needed normalcy. I moved through the motions on autopilot. When I dropped her off, she hugged me and said, "Love you, Mommy." That simple sentence nearly broke me, because even though my world had imploded, she was still there, steady and pure, the one thing that made sense. Over the next few days, the family fallout spread like wildfire. My aunt called, confused and whispering, wanting to know if it was true. My cousins texted me privately, saying they were on my side. My sister went completely silent online. No new posts, no stories, nothing. That's how I knew she was scared of the comments that would come if she pretended nothing happened. My mother tried to mediate. "Maybe someday you two can talk," she said on the phone, her voice tentative. I told her not to hold her breath. She sighed, and I could hear the guilt in it. I think she blamed herself somehow, as if raising us differently might have changed things. But this wasn't about parenting. This was about choices, selfish ones, and they weren't mine. He kept texting. At first, I ignored him, but one message made my stomach turn. "You don't have to tell people I cheated. It's between us." Between us? I wanted to scream. The betrayal wasn't private. It had invaded every part of my life. Still, I stayed calm. I'd already learned that screaming at people like him only gives them something to point at. Instead, I screenshotted every message, every insult, every half-hearted apology, and sent it to my lawyer, because if he thought he could dodge responsibility, he had another thing coming. I didn't want his money. I wanted safety. For me, for my daughter, and for the baby growing inside me. The lawyer listened patiently, her expression sympathetic but professional. She said, "You're doing the right thing. You can't change what they did, but you can protect yourself now." Walking out of that office, I felt a tiny spark of strength I hadn't felt in weeks. It wasn't vengeance, exactly. It was self-preservation. But maybe those two are cousins. Days turned into weeks. People moved on faster than I expected. The gossip lost momentum, and life crept back towards something that resembled normal. Except normal didn't fit anymore. I'd catch myself glancing at my phone, expecting a message from him, or picking up my sister's favorite coffee at the store before remembering I didn't buy things for her anymore. Grief isn't just for death. It's for the death of the version of your life you thought you were living. One afternoon, my mom called again. "Your sister wants to talk to you," she said cautiously. I closed my eyes. "Mom, she's sorry she got caught. Not for what she did." "She's crying, honey." "She was crying when I exposed her too. Didn't stop her then." Silence. Then my mom whispered, "You're stronger than I thought." I didn't feel strong. I felt like a house after a fire, still standing, but hollow inside. A few days later, my ex showed up at my apartment, unannounced. I saw his car from the window, and my heart started racing. I almost didn't open the door, but I didn't want him knocking loud enough to scare my daughter. I cracked it open just enough to make eye contact. He looked awful, unshaven, tired, his arrogance replaced with something that looked almost like shame. "Can we talk?" he asked. "No," I said flatly. "Please, just 5 minutes. I don't owe you 5 seconds. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I messed up, I know that, but you didn't have to drag our families into it. Our families were already in it. You involved them the moment you slept with my sister." His eyes flickered with anger. "You always make things bigger than they are." That line, the same one he'd used before, snapped something in me. "You ruined my life and you think I made it bigger than it is? Get out of here before I call the police." He muttered something under his breath and left. Watching him walk down the hall, I realized I felt nothing anymore. Not hate, not love, not even satisfaction. Just emptiness. But emptiness is space, and space can be filled with new things. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would not let them define me. I would rebuild, quietly, steadily, piece by piece. My revenge had already happened. The truth was out, and they had to live who they really are. My job now was to heal. Still, some nights I'd lie awake replaying that day in the living room. The looks on their faces, the silence afterward, the sound of my sister's heels clicking on the tile as she stormed out. And even though part of me wished it had never happened, another part of me, deeper, calmer, was grateful that it did. Because lies rot from the inside out, and now the rot was gone. What would you have done?
Honestly, would you have gone public like that? Or would you have stayed silent to keep the peace? I used to think peace was about avoiding conflict, but now I know peace only comes when you stop lying to yourself. The weeks that followed felt strange, like living in a dream that kept switching between calm and chaos. Some mornings I woke up and almost felt okay. I'd make coffee, pack my daughter's lunch, watch her skip down the steps with her backpack bouncing, and think maybe things were finally settling. Then I'd open my phone and see a message from an old friend who just heard what happened and wanted to check in. Every one of those messages was another little reminder that privacy is the first casualty when your world explodes. People meant well, but their curiosity stung. I'd answer politely, say I was fine, that I was focusing on the baby and on work. Inside, though, I was tired of repeating the same story. Tired of seeing the shock in people's eyes, followed by that awkward pause, the one that always came before, "I'm so sorry." My sister stayed silent for a while. Then she started testing the waters again, calling my mom, asking how I was, leaving vague comments under old family photos on social media. I didn't respond. I'd blocked her number, but she found other ways to sneak around the edges of my life. A message through a cousin, a handwritten note slipped into my mother's purse. The note said she missed me, that she'd made a terrible mistake, that she wished we could go back to how things were. I read it once and tore it up. Because how do you go back to a time before betrayal? You can't. There's no rewind for something like that. My mom tried again, of course. "She's your sister," she said. "Someday you'll regret shutting her out." "Maybe," I told her, "but right now I regret ever letting her in." It wasn't bitterness speaking. It was survival. Every time I thought about her laugh echoing through my parents' living room that day, about the look on her face when I read her own words back to her, my stomach twisted. She had made fun of me for not noticing. She thought I'd never find out. I had therapy sessions twice a week by then, mostly because my doctor insisted on it for prenatal stress. At first, I didn't know what to say. I sat there staring at the tissue box, my hands on my belly, wondering what people were supposed to say when their family broke apart. But the therapist was patient. She asked small, quiet questions. When did you start to feel like something was off? What does forgiveness mean to you? Do you believe you can forgive without reconciling? That last one stuck with me. I realized I didn't want revenge anymore. Not really. I just wanted distance. Forgiveness could come later, or not at all. Around that time, my dad finally called me. He hadn't said much at the gathering, just sat there looking like someone had drained all the color out of him. On the phone, he sounded older, heavier. "You doing okay, kiddo?" "I'm managing," I said. He cleared his throat. "Your mom told me she's worried you're alone too much." "I'm not alone. I have Mia and, well, another one on the way." He sighed. "I know what I mean. I should have said something that day. I just didn't know what to say." "You didn't have to say anything, Dad." "He did. I should have told them both to get the hell out before you even had to." That was the closest thing to anger I'd ever heard from him. It made my chest tighten. "It's done now," I said. "They did enough damage on their own." We talked for a while about practical things, repairs he could help with, how to budget for the baby. The conversation wasn't warm exactly, but it was steady. And that steadiness meant everything. Then one evening, 2 months after the gathering, my sister showed up at my door. I didn't even know she knew my new address, but there she was, standing in the hallway holding a plastic bag and looking like she hadn't slept in days. "I just need 5 minutes," she said when I cracked the door open. I didn't want to let her in. Part of me wanted to slam the door and be done with it, but there was another part, quieter, that whispered maybe I needed to hear whatever excuse she'd been saving. So I stepped aside. She came in slowly, clutching the bag like it was armor. She said, "I brought some things for Mia, books she liked and a blanket Mom made." I didn't look at the bag. "Why are you really here?" She bit her lip. "To say I'm sorry. I know you don't believe me, but I am." "Why now?" "Because I can't sleep. I keep thinking about that day, about Mom's face,
about you reading those messages. I hate myself for what I did. I crossed my arms. You hate yourself because everyone knows, not because of what you did to me. She shook her head quickly. No, I hate that I hurt you. You were always the one who took care of me, and I ruined that. He meant nothing, really. It was just, don't, I cut in. Don't say it was a mistake. You made choices over and over again. Her eyes filled with tears. I know. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know I'm not with him anymore. We haven't spoken since that day. Congratulations, I said flatly. You both lost what you wanted. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. She stood there, twisting her hands, and I felt an odd kind of pity. Not enough to invite her back into my life, but enough to let go of some of the rage that had been eating at me. Finally, I said, "You should go." She nodded, eyes down, and left the bag on the table. When she closed the door behind her, I felt lighter. Not healed, but freer. Sometimes closure isn't a conversation. It's just the quiet after someone walks away for the last time. I sat down and opened the bag. Inside were Mia's old books, a few stuffed animals, and the crocheted blanket my mom had made years ago. I folded it carefully and put it on the couch. Maybe someday I'd tell Mia where it came from. Maybe not. Life settled again. Slowly, the noise faded. My ex stopped calling. My sister stopped reaching out. The gossip moved on to someone else's drama. I started to breathe easier. When my son was born, a year after everything, I looked down at him in the hospital room and thought, this is the start of something clean. He had his father's eyes, but none of his father's lies, and that made all the difference. That night, holding him in my arms, I realized revenge doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes it's just living well after someone bets you won't. I told my story here because people always ask how you survive something like that, and the truth is, you don't, not at first. You crawl through it, one painful inch at a time, until you realize you're standing again. Would you have done the same? Would you have read those messages out loud the way I did, or kept them buried to protect the people who betrayed you? The first night home with my son was both peaceful and terrifying. He slept curled against my chest, tiny breaths brushing my collarbone. Every so often I'd stare at his face and think, you're mine, and no one can take that from me. That thought was the first real comfort I'd felt in a long time. I won't lie and say everything was suddenly okay. Healing wasn't some cinematic montage where sad music plays and the protagonist emerges perfectly put together. It was slower, messier. Some days I still woke up angry, wondering how they could have done what they did. Some days I caught myself scrolling back through old photos, looking for signs I'd missed. But the difference was the pain didn't own me anymore. It was there, but smaller, quieter, like a scar that aches when it rains. My sister and I didn't talk again for a long time after that night at my door. Every once in a while, I'd hear through my mom that she was working somewhere new, dating someone else, trying to get her life together. I wished her well, from a distance. That was all I had left to give. My ex sent one last message months later. Just a few sentences. I heard about the baby. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you're happy. I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it without replying. I didn't need his words anymore. They didn't mean anything. Forgiveness isn't a door you leave open. Sometimes it's one you quietly close for good. I went back to work after maternity leave. The first week was brutal. No sleep, no rhythm, juggling daycare drop-offs and deadlines, but it gave me something I hadn't had in a while, purpose. Every task completed felt like proof that I was still standing, still capable. My coworkers knew what had happened, news travels fast, but they treated me with quiet respect instead of pity, and that helped more than they'll ever know. One day during lunch, a colleague asked, "Do you ever think you'll date again?" I laughed, almost choking on my sandwich. I said, "Not anytime soon." But later that night, as I watched my son and daughter asleep, I realized maybe someday I would. Not because I needed anyone to fix me, but because I'd finally learned that love, real love,
isn't about blind trust. It's about honesty, patience, and choosing someone who shows up even when it's inconvenient.
Months turned into a year, then another. Time softened the edges of the memories. The betrayal that once felt like the center of my universe became just one chapter in a much larger story. I could talk about it without shaking now. Sometimes people who'd followed the gossip would ask, "Do you regret exposing them like that?" And the truth is, no, I don't. I regret what led up to it, of course. I regret ever letting them close enough to hurt me that deeply. But exposing them, that was the first time in my life I chose myself over someone else's comfort. That was the moment I stopped letting people walk over me in the name of keeping the peace. Looking back, I realize I didn't just reveal their lies that day. I revealed a part of myself I didn't know existed. The part that refuses to be silent. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about the living room, the way the air felt thick and electric, the way my sister's voice cracked, the way my mom's face crumpled when the truth sunk in. It used to haunt me. Now it just reminds me how far I've come. That moment wasn't the end of my life, it was the beginning of my real one. If you've ever been betrayed like that, you know the hardest part isn't losing the person. It's losing the version of yourself that trusted them completely. But here's what I learned. You get to build a new version. One who sees clearly, loves carefully, and never apologizes for demanding respect. My daughter is older now. She doesn't remember much from those days, just that mommy was sad for a while and then got stronger. When she asks about family gatherings, I tell her families can be complicated, but love doesn't have to be. And that's the truth. As for my sister, she sent a card on my son's second birthday. It said, "I hope someday we can talk again." I didn't reply, but I didn't throw it away either. Maybe one day I'll be ready. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means the past no longer controls you. And I think I'm finally getting there. Now, when I think about everything that happened, I don't see chaos or betrayal. I see clarity. I see a woman who walked into a room full of people who doubted her and spoke the truth anyway. I see a mother who refused to raise her children in silence or shame. I see someone who chose herself, even when it hurt. That's the real revenge. Not the public exposure, not the fallout, not the whispers that followed. The real revenge is peace. Knowing that the people who tried to break you have to watch you rebuild without them. And if you're listening to this, wondering whether it's worth it to tell the truth, to rip the bandage off and let everyone see what's underneath, let me say this. It's terrifying, but it's freeing. The silence will suffocate you faster than the fallout ever will. So, yeah, I exposed my fiancé and my sister at that family gathering, and it burned everything down. But from those ashes, I built something real. If you've ever been where I was, take this as your sign. You can survive the fire. You can even start over.